we can see you.
Yes. We put you in the middle with your attendant.
Oh, wait, I forgot my book.
All right.
I'm going to get it.
Okay. It can be brought to you if you want to stay.
I
The
wanna
book,
stay and
because
have
they're
it
listening,
brought
the
to
book will
me.
be brought to you.
I would like it to be brought to me.
It will appear
God, can you
momentarily.
hear me?
A yellow book will appear momentarily. A yellow book
you.
that's on the table. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. So, Trudy, I think you drew the straw to guide us in a short meditation before
Yes.
we begin our conversation. Is that still
Yes.
suitable for you?
Beautiful flowers. Thank you to whoever did these flowers. So taking a deep breath in and releasing. And one more time, just breathing in the aliveness of this moment. And releasing any tension in your body. And one more deep breath, intentional deep breath in. That's Jack's mindfulness step.
That's it.
I can't tell you how many times we've been teaching a meditation retreat together, and somebody's giving the Dharma talk, and suddenly, ding dong, ding dong.
We actually did a thing in New York. I was teaching with Mark Epstein, and it was a big crowd, like 1,000 people. And he said, phones, would you all please turn your phones on? And then we sat for 5 minutes, and the ringers with 1,000 people started to go off, and it was like this symphony that was happening in the room. We said, okay, now you can turn them off. Go ahead.
Okay, so we just took 3 very calm,
We did.
Sorry, my dear. I
relaxed-
apologize.
This has never happened. I never interrupted, ever. We're going to talk about that.
We'll repair. There'll be a repair later.
Lowering your gaze, taking a deep breath in. Coming back to your body with the next intentional deep breath in. And releasing. And allowing the breath to flow in its own natural rhythm. Allowing yourself to be calmed and nourished by your very own breath. And sensing and feeling the breath in your body, just how it is for you right now. If it's smooth and deep, or a little nervous and ragged. How is it for you right now? And just allowing your breath to love you. Allowing yourself to feel caressed and loved by your very own breath in your very own body. The breath knows how to attune to exactly what your body needs right now. It's perfect. And just see if you can rest in trusting that perfection of breath of the aliveness of the body, and the capacity, this great capacity of our minds and hearts for being present. For in this capacity, in this being present, we have all the ingredients we need to wake up. To wake up to the beauty, the preciousness, the gift of this life, right here, right now. And just dropping in a friendly wish. May my body be happy here today, at ease. May my mind be relaxed and at ease here today, receptive and open. And may my heart be present and full. Ding.
Thank you, Trudy. So we're here to talk about disruption and challenges and learnings in relationships. And when we say relationships, we just mean all the different ways that humans interact and connect, be they family or friends or partners or parents or whatever form that humans can take in our lives. And Ram Dass used to say that if you think you're enlightened, try to go spend a couple weeks with your family and you'll probably get more information on that enlightenment. And so relationships both bring out the best in us and potentially bring out the not so best in us. So I was wondering as we begin, if maybe both of you could speak to some of the learning that's possible in relating to humans and other humans and why this is important and why we might want to focus on this area. So Jack, do you want to start?
I'm thinking about when we first got together, which was 15 years ago?
I think
as a couple?
14, 15.
Yeah, something like
14,
that. We'd been friends
15. We
forever,
know each other
since the 70s.
since our 20s.
And we started to spend a lot of time together, and then we were going to travel. We had this trip planned, and I like to organize those kind of things, and I got our flights and our hotels and the whole big thing. And then not that long before we were supposed to go, Trudy said she didn't want to go. There was something else. Wow. And I said, but I put all this time, I booked, I did, da, 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 da. And she looked at me and she said, women change their minds. Now, we know it's not just women. I'm not kind of putting it on women. But there was something in that moment that was really important to me to understand that to have a love relationship means something different than the expectations of what I have of how it's supposed to go. And in fact, to allow Trudy or to allow that person or the people in relationship to be who they are and the way they are and not the models that we have about how it's supposed to be, which is an enormous surrender. It doesn't mean that you surrender your own perspectives or dignity, but you don't expect that other person somehow to fit or to be in that. And then subsequently, we've had wonderful years, and on occasion,
Very, very rare.
on occasion, little kinds of conflicts and things like that. And I'll say something, one tiny bit more, and that is, and maybe this is the takeaway for me for this conversation, is when we get in conflict, there's often that sense of, well, who's right about this? I don't know if you've noticed that.
Oh,
in
we
your
love being
relationship,
right.
Usually Trudy's right, I think.
Probably so. Often.
Such a deep pleasure.
But the repair somehow, if there's been disruption and so forth, means that somebody, at least one person, has to kind of say, okay, I accept, and I'll be with you. And then things can get repaired. If the two people are still stuck in their positions, I'm right, and you did this, and you did that, it doesn't resolve. Mm-hmm. So one person has to actually, you can only do it this way. You can't do it, the two of you. Otherwise, you end up with Russia and Ukraine or whatever. Seriously, somebody has to say, all right, I'm taking a step back. I'm not going to hold on. And then lean in and say, what's going on? Get curious. What's happening? And that changes the entire dynamic. Mm. So I'll pause with that.
Great.
Yeah. I think for me, what's been amazing about this relationship, and I do need full disclosure, Jack is husband number 4, my favorite of all. When I say you are my favorite one of
Thank you,
all.
What an honor.
Some of us are determined to find love, no matter what. And I think for me the most amazing and challenging part has been just accepting that I am accepted and loved. That's simple. That, we joke about how much we both love to be right. I worked for many, many years as a couples therapist, family therapist, working with kids too, and I would say to warring couples, would you rather be close or would you rather be right? Because often it's not going to be both. And I was thinking, just Sunday, I woke up and I was just feeling grumpy. And usually I would go to the farmer's market, and I came in the living room and sort of defiantly announced to Jack, I just don't feel like going to the farmer's market today. It's a thing, it's a job. And he said, and it was my tone of voice. It's not what you say so often, it's your tone of voice. And he said, well, we're only here for a short time. And I thought, oh my gosh, you're right. We're only on this earth for a short time. Like, why would I talk to you like that? He just meant we're only up here for a few days. So it's fine if you don't go to the farmer's market. But I also think this is where practice comes in. If we're practicing mindfulness, if we're practicing self-compassion, we're doing these loving kindness practices, we're open to the truth of impermanence, that really all things are impermanent. If we keep that truth in our hearts, it's also harder to cling to whatever grumpy, grouchy thing you find yourself immersed in the moment. So I was very grateful for that, my misunderstanding of what you said. We're only here for a short time, everybody. It really matters how we are. And my first teacher, San Sanim, Venerable Sung San, who I was introduced to by my old childhood friend, John Kabat-Zinn, he used to say to us jokingly when we were we thought it was a joke because we were in our 20s. We'd get upset about it. He'd say, oh, soon dead. Soon dead. Jack and I are about to turn 80 this summer, right? It's not as funny right now. Yeah.
Great. So I'm wondering, Jack, if you want to speak a little bit about repair. You had talked about the challenges that sometimes people have when there's tension, and that one person has to step up and say, could you tell me a little bit about what you're feeling, or I'm sorry I did this, or how was I misrepresented? Could you share a little bit about what that looks like in your life and working with people and in your own dynamics and relationships?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out where to start. I was working with a couple that was in tremendous conflict. They came in to see me, and I said, well, let's arrange this in a way that you feel comfortable to talk about these difficult things, like where you feel somewhat safe. And immediately the woman of the couple got up, walked out, and closed the door. And then, about a few seconds later, the door opened and you could see one eye peeking through. She said, okay, I feel safe here. But it was something very graphic about making a space, whatever it takes, where we feel safe enough first to listen to each other, and what that takes. And part of helping that happen is the element of curiosity, or wanting to know what would make it feel okay to talk about this, and it might be, well, I can't talk about it for a few days. I'm still, so upset, or whatever. But to lean in with a curiosity rather than an agenda already makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
So
Even if you're pretty sure you're right.
Of course. Of course. Yeah, so that's a first step, and then that quality, what you were talking about, Trudy, would you rather be right or do you want to learn? Mm-hmm. Yeah. If there's some sense that you actually, what's going on? And we were talking in the room before coming in here backstage about, and we'll get to it, about the relationships in the body politic right now, and how easy it is to imagine the other side, the enemy, and so forth, and not be so curious about, well, what makes you feel that way? Yeah. What's going on in there? And that becomes actually the movement to make a difference.
Even if they don't seem to be curious about you.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
No, your job is not to fix them. Yeah. It's actually to listen more deeply in some way. And I get calls sometimes working with people where there's been estrangement between parents and children. And, oh, my son, my daughter, whatever, they don't do this, they don't call that, whatever, or they've broken contact. And I'll say, you're the parent. It's your job to build the bridge. It's not their job.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
So we have that inner capacity to do that.
Trudy, we had talked also about how, kind of practicing relationships and in all our different interhuman interactions is some way kind of cultivating and supporting the world that we want to live in. And sometimes the world seems to be moving in a direction that we don't agree with. But how do we actually stay true to our own values, whether that's truthfulness and love? And could you speak a little bit about how you're trying to balance that between what you see in the world and then what your own inner world is trying to navigate?
Yeah, thank you, Soren. I have felt sometimes almost like slipping into some despair about the outer world, whether it's the climate or, I have friends from Darfur and Sudan, there's another genocide, or whether it's what's happening in our country. Our country, people are being disappeared in our country. That used to only happen in other people's countries, not in our country. So I can get, as I'm sure many of you, I can get pretty upset about all this. And then in that way, our relationships, whether it's intimate, couple relationship, friendships, good colleagues, whatever relationships we have, they can be such a sanctuary and not just a refuge from what's happening in the outside world. necessary sanctuary and refuge, but also a way to practice the things we want to see in the outside world. So by telling the truth, by being honest, by being as loving as we can muster in any given moment, I feel like whatever trust we can build between us in our relationships and our communities, it's an act of resistance against the forces that are trying to erode that trust and isolate us and fracture our connections with all the things that we know are fracturing our connections, the divisiveness, the assault on truth and on human rights in our country. And so for me, it's super helpful and to look at our relationships as, I don't know, a place where we can stand our ground and strengthen the resilience that we have so that we can stand up also more in our communities and in our world.
That's beautiful. I remember Nima Karli Baba supposedly, Maharaj used to tell Ramdas, you have two things, love everyone and tell the truth. And he's like, but the truth is I don't love everyone.
Yeah.
And so what do you do with those, I don't know if we call them shadowy parts or like repressed parts, or like you talk to the Buddhists and they're like, are you angry? And Buddhists, no, I'm not angry, I'm just loving. You're like, I don't think you're really angry right now. So how do we own those feelings and those emotions and those resentments and those judgments, but not also let them take us over? Because I think it's easy to kind of try to pretend that we're okay with everything, or because we're Buddhist or whatever we are, where we have a certain state, but that there's all these other feelings that are coming along, and I'm wondering how we work with those emotions in a way that's authentic, but also doesn't breed the same qualities that we so much, because I remember when Obama was president, people just hate Obama. Like, how do you hate Obama? But he represented all these things, and they hated him.
Hated, yeah.
And now we have a different president, and there's a lot of people that hate, and it's like, I understand, but is hate a quality that we also want to cultivate? And where do we honestly find some sense of love and peace within us, but that's not suppressing everything else?
I mean, for me, the Buddha was really helpful because the Buddha was very clear, how you decide whether you want to do something or cultivate a certain feeling is it onward leading? And that word onward leading meant, does it lead to happiness or does it lead to suffering? Does it lead to more connection? Does it lead to more disruption? I mean, disconnection, because we're talking about positive disruption too here, not just, is it destructive? Is it constructive? And that's that to me is very helpful, that guideline. And then also, Jack and I both worked as therapists, but I think I probably did it longer, that helping people see. Actually, it was your turn to speak.
No, keep going.
Okay.
See how harmonious
I think
we
you did
all
longer
are.
and better. Go ahead, keep going.
No, I was just going to say, helping all of us get comfortable with all of who we are, and I think Dick Schwartz is going to talk about that later, but helping all of us get comfortable with all of who we are. We can just say, okay, right now, angry Buddha, right now, sad Buddha, right now, outraged Buddha, right now, hating Buddha, right now, itchy Buddha, whatever it is, it's the truth of this moment. And once again, we're not here very long. Nothing lasts forever, including your anger, hate, depression, grief, even heartbreak. Part of having had as many partners as I've had means there have been as many breakups and all the heartache of each one of those, and the bad disruption of lives and extended families and everything that goes with that, with divorces and heartbreaks. How to learn to accept the whole of who we are. This is, again, where practice and mindfulness and awareness practices are so valuable, because we realize I'm more than my anger. I'm not only my hatred and my grief, I'm more than that. And the more than that is my innate great perfection. Awareness is always here, waiting for us when we can access. We can't always access. Sometimes we're in too much distress to be able to access, the spaciousness of awareness. But it is always here. The one clear, true thing that can hold all of it.
Thanks. Jack, did you want to say?
Yeah, I'm sort of back thinking about Ram Dass, and there was a beautiful moment at the memorial service for Ram Dass a few years ago after he died. And Krishna Das, the musician that many of you know, who was with Ram Dass from very early on with his guru, Neem Karoli Baba, and he said something about Ram Dass. He said, he was talking about knowing Ram Dass when he came back and was Baba Ram Dass in the 1970s with the beard and the beads and the white robes and, sort of. And he said, Ram Dass became the person we thought he was when we met him. And one of the remarkable things of the last 20 years of his life in the wheelchair is he became incredibly loving. And you'd be with him and he would say, I love this and I love it, and there'd be some difficulty. He said, I love that too. Somebody said, aren't you in pain? He said, I love my pain. How about that? Wow. And to be in that field of somebody who carries that much love, he would look at you with so much love that it's like all the rest of it didn't matter. It changed everything. Now, two important things about it. One is that he did it because he practiced. It didn't just happen, but it was really his lifelong devotion, which is what you're saying. And the Buddhist first noble truth that there is suffering in life. Anybody not have that? Please raise your hand. Okay. Part of the game in some way, which you were talking about, Trudy, is to expand our heart's capacity to be present for the beauty and the suffering together and be present for it, which is what you learn in meditation, because there are times when you just want to run away, or in divorce, which for me too, here we talk about our little spats, but my divorce was, the two words I used was anguish and agony. It was so painful. And I had to use all the practice that I had. And even so, I would sort of drown in it sometimes just because it was so painful after 30 plus years and having a child. So, and human life is hard. It just is. And what you said, Trudy, that we also can become the heart has the capacity to hold it all. Yeah. That we can be the loving presence or the loving witness, because in the end, that's who you are at the end of life. So in some way, we're practicing together. We're doing it individually, but also we're in what Joanna Macy calls the great turning, where late-stage exploitive capitalism is not working so well for humanity, and we have to find a new way to be together, and that means things being disrupted and pull apart. The through line is our care. Yeah. Somehow.
And it seems like community. You were saying about how the monks would do things. There was somehow a community holding things, and not just an individual holding things.
Yes, right. So if we shift to whether it's in couples work, you go to see somebody else who's outside the system, and they look at you and say, "Whoa, look at them," But in any way, it's helpful to have somebody who's not lost in your state of consciousness. As a monastic. We had these sets of vows, and one of the important vows, of course, was celibacy. So I found myself in this monastery. Remember, I'm a young guy in his 20s, and one of the rules, you can't act out sexually, you can't masturbate. Okay. So, And if you have to confess, because otherwise you can't be honest with the people around you. You have to confess in front of 20 monks. Right? So I'm in this monastery. Fortunately, it's not just me. There are a lot of young monks. We won't talk about the nuns, but the young monks. And, periodically they have an event where if you feel you're not in honest harmony with the community, you come and you do a confession in front of 20 elders. And for me, as a young man, there were lots who were in my position, shall we say. And then they assign you're silent for a month, you do certain practices. The understanding, and it's been for thousands of years, is that you can feel when you're out of repair with the community. You can't sit there and do your chanting and say, I followed the rules. You know. And that repair is actually what brings the community back together. But it has to be witnessed. It has to be acknowledged and then forgiven in some way. So there's something, it's like the truth and reconciliation practice. There's something extremely powerful about us coming together with the intention to make repair. So we can hear things in truth and reconciliation, heard the most horrible things, but the through line was the intention to make a repair underneath it all.
I love that image of covering mud with straw.
Yeah, that's part of the end of that reconciliation process. Everybody has their views, then there's an acknowledgement and apologies and so forth, and then the elders come in, and the image is covering mud with straw is to say, let's cover what was difficult and gooky, and everybody got stuck in, so that you can walk across it and get to a different place.
Yeah.
So in some way, we're looking for that. We don't want to be, in general, we don't want to inwardly feel like we're out of harmony with who we are, and outwardly with one another.
Yeah.
And I think what's powerful about what you were describing, Jack, is the community witnessing, and you're not alone, and that is such an antidote to shame. The shame that we feel about our feelings and who we are. And I must be, how could I call myself a spiritual teacher? Well, I don't call myself that, but how could I present myself to the world as that when actually I'm whatever, fill in the blanks, that's not very spiritual. And so that can be oppressive too, the identity, whatever identity you're holding, that you should be a certain way. And if you're not that way, and if your feelings, maybe you're a wonderful activist like Puent, or maybe but maybe deep down you're terrified and you feel like I should be more courageous. Whatever the should is that you feel you should be in order to be completely and authentically who you are. The community repair, the community recognition that we are all both, imperfect perfections, we're all the way that we are. And this comes back to the question of hate versus acceptance. And are we going to make everybody who doesn't agree with us our enemy? Or are we going to realize, just like me, they're scared. They're scared of losing their jobs. They're scared of AI coming. They're scared of, just like me, just like you. That is such a powerful connector. And that's what we need, without shame and blame, to be able to connect as imperfect, perfect humans.
And that's everybody. It's
everybody.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of compassion then for yourself and others.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's so interesting when people laugh at that original Ram Dass thing about going to your family, because I think we can see ourselves in these different roles. Like, I've attained something, or I've matured, or I've grown. And you realize, put yourself with different conditions,
Right.
that may not be the case so much. And it does feel like there's a certain loving forgiveness or embrace or compassion that seems essential as we learn. Like friends were telling me that when they, these are friends that are on the liberal side, that when they used to travel internationally and Obama was president, they traveled with like all this pride. And now, because they don't like the current president, they travel and they're almost embarrassed. You know, because
I have a
We have
switch.
sweatshirts that say Canada.
you do, okay.
That we
But
can
why not
wear when we
own, like, this
travel.
is a part of us too, right? Like, America is made up of multiple facets of perspectives, right? Some of them currently show up, these other ones show up. And how do we hold all of that in a way of depth and understanding the humanity that we all are?
Right. How can we look at somebody who is, I don't know, Russian or Israeli,
Yeah.
and not imagine that they must be somehow complicit or responsible for what
Yeah.
their governments are doing?
Yeah.
You know, this is a big question.
Yeah.
And it is hard right now. I mean, Canadians, I don't know if you're out there biting their nails right now. And Mexico flexing her muscles.
Yeah.
Have you seen Claudia shine? La amo tan. I love her so much.
Yeah. And it's often in really hard times that the greatest activists appear. It sucks that we change when things get hard, but it does seem that humans, the most difficult moments are when the heart expands the most. I wish it was another way, but it does seem that there's a way in which challenges bring out the worst or the best in people.
Gosh, I really hate to hear you say that because it is so true. I have had, no, I mean, my most powerful insights or spiritual openings have really come at times of immense suffering.
Yeah.
Not that you have to go through that, but I think I was maybe a tough nut to crack or something, like I had to go through that because it happened.
Yeah.
And honoring everything that brought us to this very moment is so important. Because here we are, we get to do this together, and we get to reflect and explore the idea. I mean, again, for me, just coming back to more of the beginning, the idea that truth-telling and honesty in our personal relationships can be a revolutionary act at a time when misinformation and, I mean, deception and is just so rampant in our world.
So how does that work with Jack? Would it work with, like, you know what, I was judging you and you were really pissing me off and I wasn't truthful to you about it now? How does that show up with your friends or partners?
We tell each other, like, okay, here's an example.
Yeah.
Just like I lost my hair last year, I had a traumatic illness, I'm fine now. And so it grew back, it's grown back very weird, and anyway, I finally got enough hair to have a haircut the other day. It was very exciting. And I came home and I really was happy that my haircut. I was aware that I looked a little bit like that one of the Three Stooges that had their hair cut, like, I don't know, just very blunt, weird, kind of sticking out, blunt cut. And Jack was so sweet. He didn't say anything until I put my hair up. And then he said, "Oh, your hair looks so much better now." But like 3 days had gone by and he didn't say anything, which was a kindness. It was a kindness. But then he told me the truth. And that's a trivial example. But sometimes those trivial examples can carry, they're emblematic of how we can be both kind and tactful with each other. Yeah, you look good in that. And then later saying, but actually you look better in that after the event is over. But yeah.
Yeah. Jack, how do you find yourself practicing these elements in whatever relationships, the multiple facets?
I notice, that I have, now that I've kind of been practicing mindfulness, that I have a lot more judgment than I would have thought. And it just comes up. It's there.
Yeah.
The thing that I do two things with it. One is I don't judge it, because it's like, okay, judging is bad, but what's that, right? So it doesn't get you very far. Say, thank you for your opinion. I appreciate it. That's different. And then I almost instantly switch to metta. I switch, whether I'm driving and somebody's, cut me off and whatever, or something happens with Trudy or something and a judgment comes. And my metta practice, I love to look at people and imagine them as kindergartners, basically. And just see them as a young child, which is there in everybody. Yeah. And it instantly flips the channel. I go, oh yeah, who knows what they're carrying? Who knows what they are? So I want to add something else. This is sort of going back to the First Noble Truth, and anguish and agony and things like that. We all go through some super hard things in our life, so it's one thing to talk about day-to-day repair. In the Bhagavad Gita, it says, if you want to see the heroic, look to those who can return love for hatred. If you want to see the brave, look to those who can forgive. And that means both forgiving yourself and others, that we tend to be identified with the small self, the separateness, the body of fear, it's called. But you also have tremendous courage. And these times are calling for our bravery, both interpersonally and collectively, as you were pointing to, Trudy. So I also have a question for you that's personal, but again, taking the intersection or connection between the personal and the collective. When we talk about repair, a kind of reflection for you. What needs repair in your life? If you take a moment to think about it. Because part of that work in the monastery where we were practicing is to say, are you in honorable connection, or does something feel off? Mm-hmm. Maybe in the 12th step, it's, doing a fearless moral inventory. It's the equivalent of that. Mm-hmm. And then what is it needs repair? And what would it take to do that? Soren, do you remember, because we spent time with Stephen and Andrea Levine, yeah. Trudy did too, but Stephen would say sometimes, if this were your last week on earth, who would you call? What would you say? Mm-hmm. And why are you waiting? So there's something about also living in an honorable way, yeah. And it takes a kind of courage, but as you feel it, then it also inspires all the other things that you can do.
When you say, what makes you think you even have a week?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. I do think that if we look at our times, there's part of the reason the conference is called Disruption is it feels that there is disruption, that candidates across the globe are the most disruptive candidate is often the one that's kind of chosen. And even in the US, like the people that are the most popular are either, Trump on one hand or Bernie Sanders and AOC on the other hand, who want to kind of create a different kind of disruption. And there's AI, there's climate change, there's all these things that seem to be emerging in our times that say somehow the old system that existed just isn't kind of satisfying on multiple levels from multiple perspectives. And now how do we move forward in a way that is more inclusive and less divisive than some of the other things that are past? And I think the truth is, as much as I'm kind of democratic or liberal leaning, the more they convince me that the other people are bad, the more money we fund them to keep that institution running. And the same with the other side. The more clicks that Fox News gets about how horrible we are, the more CNN there's this system that's like, look at how bad those other people are. And how do we move past that to some sense of humanity being all of us together, basically wanting the same things, wanting more economic opportunity, wanting safety, wanting to be loved, wanting to feel like we're in a community. And so I'm wondering if both of you could speak to maybe what is the path that you could see that shifts some of this divisiveness that seems to be so entrenched in our current system, and that there's this huge longing, I think, for all of us to try to step out of that.
Yeah, I think it's important for each of us to know what our kind of karmic affinities, our innate capacities, what is it you're good at or talented at or feel comfortable doing. One thing that I try to do every day is just talk to people, smile at them, talk to them, listen to them. And we might have just a few minutes together, but that's a moment of connection. And building those moments constantly of connection with each other. We both leave feeling better for it.
Yeah.
We do.
Yeah.
And then on a practical level, I did bring this book that I just wanted to show you. It's by an activist named Sergio Popovich, and it's called Blueprint for Revolution: How to Use Rice Pudding, Lego Men, and Other Nonviolent Techniques to Galvanize Communities to Overthrow Dictators or Simply Change the World. He was the organizer of the great youth movement in that actually was a big part of overthrowing the dictator Milosevic, Serbian Milosevic. But I love this book because he talks about really simple things that we can do with our neighborhoods, you know, with our friends, with our communities. We don't have to think, I mean, it depends, you know, but we don't have to. And the book it goes sequentially from the very little things to the huge things. But it all comes back to unity and feeling, what is it? There was this chant we used to chant during demonstrations, El pueblo unido jamás será vencido, right? The people united will never be defeated. We have more power than we realize.
Yeah.
And I think that we can, it's just hard. We have to maybe stop scrolling on our phones and use our phones to connect with each other and build connection and do that intentionally. There's lots of practical ways. But I think to remember we're not helpless in the face of these things. I read a beautiful article this morning, actually, in the New York Times about how 100 million people in our country have yards and lawns. We don't, but lots of people do. And if everybody in the country turned their yard and their lawn into a habitat for birds and insects and creatures, you know, the right plants and the right soil and things like that, it wouldn't be grass. Or even when people, before they mowed their grass, if they would walk the grass so that all the insects and worms would have a chance to escape before they mow the lawn. I mean, there are just so many things that would make a difference that we can all do. And they do matter. Each one of us matters. Your voice matters. Your thinking matters. Sansanim used to ask us, how are you keeping your mind in this moment? Because it matters. We feel each other. We have sonar. Someday science will actually know how it works, but we do. Yeah.
Jack, your thoughts on this question?
Well, a few things. I want to give a little shout out for Joy. Okay. And in this dialogue, Molly Ivins, who is a great writer, journalist, and activist in Texas, said, you know, yes, stand up for what matters in this world, beloveds, but don't forget to have fun doing it. That was her line. Okay. And if you go in a refugee camp, they don't want more depressed people coming in. It doesn't help. There's something about doing what you do with a light heart or with that kind of care. During the very beginning of the first Trump administration, there was demonstrations at the airport because of the ban from people coming in from those predominantly Muslim countries. And I went down with my daughter, who's a human rights immigration lawyer, and a bunch of her young hotshot lawyers. But there were some thousands of people there with the signs chanting, no ban, no fear, refugees, welcome here. You know, and it was at the different immigration gates and a demonstration. at our gate, there was hundreds of people. On the side was this New Orleans jazz band that came, right? So we're chanting, no band, no fear. And then this trumpet plays a riff on top of that. And then the drummer kicks in, pretty soon, and the sax gets a little melody, and pretty soon it's no band, no fear, refugees, welcome here. It turned into a whole song. Everybody's dancing and singing. The guards are smiling, everybody. We were there because we cared. We didn't go away, but we did it in an entirely different spirit.
Yeah.
So there's something about that too, which kind of artistically, creatively brings in our humanity. And then sort of a non sequitur, how about having Wisdom 2.0 in a heavy red state and inviting it to be a place of dialogue between...
That's great.
I'm
from Texas, after all.
And making it fun, even.
Yeah,
that's possible.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. We're going to take one or two questions, but I want to say that there is a story I read, the growth mindset and fixed mindset. Most people know that. There's a fixed mindset where it's like my identity and am I smart or am I not smart? And when challenges come up, you're like, oh shit, I hope I can meet the challenges because I want to be this certain identity. And then growth mindset is whatever the challenge comes, how do I expand myself to learn? And there's a story about these two kids, and one kid got this really hard challenge, and he was doing more of the fixed mindset. He's like, oh, I can't do this. I'm not. I guess I'm not smart. And then there's this other kid who's practicing the growth mindset. It's a really hard challenge, and I guess he looked up at the teacher and he's like, isn't it cool to have a great challenge? And I sometimes think about our society right now. If we could all band together. Isn't it cool to have such a beautiful challenge in front of us?
To bring us together.
Yeah, with all the things, right? All this is happening. We can turn to each other. It's like, wow, isn't this amazing that we actually have the challenge while honoring all the shit that's happening and the pain and the suffering and the disappearing and all this stuff that's going that way. So I think there was a mic.
There's a mic.
If you have a question you want to bring in, we'll just have time for one or two questions, but feel free. Does somebody have the...
Hello. Hey, Jack. Hey, Trudy. My name's Zubin. I'm actually kind of shaking before I'm going to ask this question, but I've been here for a day, and we're talking about disruption. And what I have not heard anyone talk about is connection to Source, Spirit, God, Creator. How do we realize our infinite potential if we're not talking about this openly and removing the taboo around it? There's so much fear around this topic. A lot of my work has been around the taboo of death, and now my work is around the taboo of God. And I don't believe we can actually create the change we're talking about if we don't each build that connection, or define it for ourselves, what God is for us. We can call it anything: love, universal consciousness, divine mother, nature. But to me, it's the missing link between where we're at as humanity and where we need to go. And so I'd love to just hear anything you might have to share about that.
Well, Susan, first of all, I really thank you for that question, because I had meant to talk about, when I said, we're about to turn 80, that it actually, there's a saying that after your 70 years, every year after that is a God-given year. It's a blessing. It's given to us as a blessing. And I think what maybe you're feeling, what you are feeling is missing, is making the connection. When I talk about awareness or all-encompassing awareness, to me, that's God. And I don't find it, up in the sky or outside of myself or in a temple, a church, a mosque, or a holy book. I find it in my heart. And to me, that when we talk about practice and mindfulness, that's what we're talking about. And I appreciate your making it explicit, because we're really talking about connecting with the divine, connecting with God. And it's here that we need to connect. in order to realize the unity and other things we've been talking about today, standing up for love and connection and so forth. So really, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Somebody else have a mic over? Raise your hand so we can see you. One of the things I've always appreciated, which I've tried to live, that I got from actually Stephen Levine, he would always say, you can't know the truth. You can only be the truth. And if you know the truth, you're a little bit dangerous because then you have this knowledge. But if you're being the truth, it's like the story, I don't know who came from the story, but it's the woman, so she was Buddhist, and she would go home to her Christian family, and they would always get into arguments. And then she realized, I'm just going to be like the Buddha. And then she says, my parents hate me when I'm a Buddhist, but they love me when I'm the Buddha.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Just a comment that comes out of how pain opens up the opportunity for growth. And that's been so true in my life. And I learned an acronym some time ago, which is AFOG, another fucking opportunity to grow.
Thank you.
So any closing thoughts as we wrap up? We just have a few minutes. Anything you want to leave the group with here today that's on your heart or that maybe either hasn't been said or wants to be given a little more attention?
No matter what age you are, every year is a God-given year. Every day is a God-given day. And we're only here for a short while. So thank you.
Soon dead.
When you ask that and I start to get quiet and feel us present here or those watching online, there's a great tenderness that comes because we are in these both difficult times. There have been others. Humanity has been through a lot over the millennium. We're all survivors and we're in the stream of our ancestors who survived. But this is a very tender time for our hearts and for our sense of community. And so just to feel that we can come together and have this, the Sufis call it a sohbet, a conversation of the heart, that we can share, all right, here we are, let's hold hands, let's remind each other who we are, what really matters, what's sacred, and also that it's hard. We can do this, we know how to do this.
Yeah.
And it has tears,
Yeah.
along with, success.
Yeah.
And that feels just important to hold. It's not fixing, it's a very deep presence.
Yeah.
And I just want to add to the reminder that how we hold our relationships really can be an act of resistance to what we don't like in the world and how we can spread something different.
Yeah. And I like the shift between how do I get this person to change, which is how do I expand and break my heart in such a way that I expand myself, such that they don't need to change, but that there's a different frequency or a different way of relating because I've expanded, not because I've gotten them to change. And to me, that's very heartening.
And it's palpable. As a therapist, when I would sit a meditation retreat and then come back to work with people, they would all have insights. How did that happen?
Yeah.
They didn't go on retreat. But there's something about that inner space that we create within ourselves, and it really is contagious.
Yeah.
And I want to thank you for creating this space for year after year, Soren. Yeah. And I want to thank all the people
behind the
backstage
scenes.
who are
Yes,
made sure the
such
house
a
lights
great-
are on and all the good things. Yeah.
And remember, whatever you've reflected on that needs repair, you can actually do that. Even if they died, you can write them a letter. I promise you, you write that letter, they'll hear it or they'll read it. So we're in this repair together, and then new things want to grow.
And as we change, the world changes. Yeah.
May-
Thank you, Trudy. Thank you, Jack.
Thank you,
Blessings.
Soren.
Thank you.